Chapter 9. The River Thames. Pip flinched every time the paper scroll crinkled under her arm as Dickon returned to the dark underground canal tunnel, following a stone footpath that ran alongside the black, rushing water. With each step, the river grew louder, and as it swelled to a roar, she watched it race downwards and shoot through a large opening in a wall that brought the tunnel to an end. "Not far now," Dickon said, rounding a corner to the right and stepping into a side tunnel thick with shadows. "I'll find us a nice sarnie when we get back to St. Giles, and I bet your mates will be happy to see you after everything that's happened to you." "They don't give a stuff about me," Pip said, remembering the altercation with the thieves. "If they did, they would never have left me like that. I don't need them or their stinking friendship. I don't need anybody." "It sounds like you've got a lonely life ahead of you then. Everyone needs somebody." Pip's throat tightened. She already knew she had a lonely life ahead of her without Mama and Papa. She closed her eyes and pictured Mama's kind face that righted every wrong and Papa's smile that was as warm as it was mischievous. She wondered what they would do if they were with her now. As she took the scroll from under her arm, slowly and carefully keeping an eye on Dickon's twitching ears, she unpeeled the edge of the roll of paper to see what was inside. At that moment, a dark figure darted across their path, closely followed by a second. Coming to an abrupt stop, Dickon squinted into the gloom with a vigorous sniff. Quickly hiding the scroll under her arm again, Pip's nose twitched uneasily, smelling something that made her shudder. "Who's there?" Dickon growled, the fur on the back of his neck bristling with unease. "Answer me," he yapped. "Now!" "Well, look who it is," a sharp voice sneered in the darkness, speaking loudly over the river rushing nearby. A growl rumbled in Dickon's throat as he took 2 cautious steps backwards towards the water's edge. "Twice in one day," another voice said, revealing sharp, rotten teeth in the gloom. "Now there's a stroke of luck." Watching the figures step closer, Pip gasped with horror. It was the crooks, and both bore crimson cuts from the fight with Hans and Dickon earlier that day. The rat's ears were torn to ribbons, and the sparrow could only open one eye. "Climb down and stay back, Pip," the terrier said urgently, dipping his head to the ground. Pip clambered down at once and dashed to a nearby wall, holding the scroll tighter than ever under her arm. This could get ugly. "You bet it will, fleabag," the sparrow snarled. "I've thought of nothing else since you chucked us in the canal." Dickon growled, curling his lips around his sharp white fangs. At once the thieves pounced on his muzzle, and the dog yelped as claws, teeth and talons ripped into his fur. With a frenzied shake of his head, the umbrella struck their bodies and hurled them away from him. At the same moment, Dickon gasped as it slipped from his jaws and slammed into the wall above Pip with a bang. Diving out of harm's way, she cried out with fear as the umbrella bounced off the bricks and fell dangerously close to the edge of the side tunnel and the water rushing through the opening below. The rat leapt to the umbrella as the sparrow clawed and pecked Dickon's eyes and nose. Before the rat could snatch the canopy, Pip threw herself to the umbrella's silver handle, perilously hanging over the water's edge, and hurried along with it, her heart in her throat. Remembering Papa teaching her about Jonas Hanway and the King of Persia, she pressed the small button concealed in a carved fig leaf on its side, bursting the canopy open. Catapulted into the air, the rat hurtled into the sparrow, knocking him from his vicious perch on Dickon's head. As the crooks tumbled to the ground, the dog pounced with a fearful roar. Scrapping together in a ball of fur and feathers, 2 crunches sounded as Dickon's jaws snapped shut around them. Breathless with horror, Pip turned away and looked at the water below, rushing through the large hole in the wall. Beyond it there was a glimmer of sunlight shimmering on the surface of a great expanse of water, moving swiftly to the left. Her whiskers popped upright with an idea. Dickon had told her that the river fleet ended when it flowed into the River Thames. Mama and Papa had taught her the Thames was the only big river in London, flowing into the North Sea, which led to mainland Europe. Her heart raced with a sudden impulse. She had the message in the scroll. If she could sail the umbrella to Normandy, she'd have her chance to help the French resistance in exchange for help in getting to Italy. This was it. With a glance at Dickon, who was still a few paces away from her, she ran up inside the open umbrella canopy, and pushing it with all her might, she turned around to face the canal. "What are you doing?" the dog yapped urgently, hearing the umbrella scrape roughly across the ground. As he hurried to reach the umbrella, it tipped over the edge and hit the swiftly moving water below with a small splash. "No!" he howled, shifting nervously on his paws as he considered jumping in after her. "That's the Thames. The water is too dangerous. Humans drown in there." "It'll be all right," Pip cried. The truth was that she had no idea what was going to happen now. All she knew was that she had to get herself and the umbrella to Gigneys. She couldn't stay in St. Giles with all its bad friends and thieves, and if Dickon, Hans and Bernard Booth couldn't help her, then she had to help herself. As she looked up at the terrier desperately sprinting alongside the rushing water, tears filled her eyes. She was really going to miss him. He had been the best friend she had ever had. "No!" Dickon barked desperately, seeing the scroll under Pip's arms. "That's not meant for you. You'll never make it." "Goodbye, Dickon," Pip said. "Thank you for—" But before she could say any more, the water gurgled and the umbrella abruptly slammed onto its side as it was sucked through the opening. Plunging downwards, it smacked the surface of the Thames and span in a circle. Lying flat on her back against the canopy, Pip stared into the enormous, swirling clouds, glowing with the first pinks and oranges of sunset. As the strong current swiftly carried the umbrella across the water, her ears pricked as she heard a familiar melody. Carefully scampering to the top of the upturned silver handle, she looked upstream. In the distance, towering over the enormous river and the surrounding buildings, stood a long, slim silhouette pointing into a coral sky. As its bells tolled 8 o'clock, she saw Big Ben for the first time. Soon the dappled clouds above the Thames bled scarlet and violet, and in the fading light, London laid bare its wounds from the past 5 years of war. Each destroyed building stood for another devastated family, and Pip's heart grew heavy, wondering how the world had become so mad with war and hatred. The great, unharmed grey dome of St. Paul's Cathedral passed by, and at once she felt stronger for seeing it stand tall above the ruins. Whatever happened in France, she couldn't fail, because she would have tried. Mama and Papa would be proud of that, she thought, unravelling the scroll inside her paws to look at it. "John has a long moustache," she read aloud. It sounded ridiculous and made no sense to her at all. Knowing she was finally on her way to Italy, the weight of the previous day and night clung to every hair on her body. Weak with exhaustion, she carefully clambered down the umbrella handle to the canopy, carrying the scroll in her paw, and crawled behind the top notch where her family nest used to be. With a yawn that shuddered her body from the tips of her whiskers to the end of her tail, she curled up in a little ball and fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. But as Pip gently rocked back and forth inside the umbrella, bobbing across the water, a shuddering boom sounded in the distance downstream.